Closing my eyes, I focused on the vast interior of Valhalla, Asgard's hall of fallen warriors, the gleams of gold all around, the swords and spears mounted all across the walls, the scent of mead and aged wood lacing the air. I pulled my sense of myself inward and hurled myself toward those impressions, and with a lurch and a gust of wind, my feet landed on the polished floorboards. I dragged the mead tang into my lungs and glanced around me. Valhalla still looked as lonely as it had when I'd first been propelled into the building 2 decades ago. The only fallen warrior who'd graced this space in centuries was the godly giant I'd raised from the dead, who had plenty of better things to do than hang around in here. Neither Odin nor the other gods had seen the need to conjure any Valkyries besides me. But while it had felt haunted back then, now the expansive silence gave me a sense of peace. I stretched my arms, soaking in the atmosphere and letting the tension in my stomach release as much as I could convince it to. Then I headed out into Asgard. None of the gods ever bothered locking their doors. I barged right into the God of Darkness's hall to hear voices carrying from one of the rooms, both Hode's and Loki's. "All I know is your schemes have gotten us into trouble, about as often as they've gotten us out of it, sly one," Hode was saying, his tone dry but not caustic. He and the trickster hadn't been at each other's throats since the war with Surt, which meant now they had about as close to a friendly relationship as anyone could really hope for. "And then I get us right out of that trouble," Loki replied in his breezy way. "Although I assure you this scheme will be nothing but joyfully received. Do you still have no trust in me, Dark One?" Hode made a sound like a harumph. Before he could answer that teasing question, I reached the doorway to the library where he was sitting in an armchair with a book, Loki ambling along the shelves behind him. Both men's heads snapped towards me, Loki's amber gaze nearly as bright as his fiery hair, Hode's dark green eyes centering on me by sound alone. He knew me so well I would have believed he was actually seeing me if I hadn't been aware of his blindness. I raised my eyebrows at Loki. "What are you plotting now?" "Ah, don't worry about that, Pixie. You'll find out when the time is right." The trickster swept over and stole a kiss I didn't mind giving up, the heated press of his mouth offering a passionate promise of good things to come. He drew back with a sly grin. "You know I wouldn't pull off any of my best plans without you." I poked him in the chest. "A little advance notice would be nice this time." "But surprises are so much fun." He winked at me and walked jauntily off. I glanced toward Hode, who shook his head, predicting my question before I could ask it. "I hate to think how he'll eviscerate me if I go spilling his secrets. It might not amount to anything anyway."